We have to be honest. Our enemies, they've lost the physical war. They're going to continue losing. We're going to continue getting safer. But the narrative war, they're winning that. Welcome to this Miriam Institute briefing. I'm Yaakov, an in-house analyst at the Miriam Institute. And I wanted to take an opportunity here to share a couple of observations with you. And I think that, if we zoom out for a second and look at the overall situation, we might see two trends happening that at first might look contradictory, but actually, when we zoom out, we can see that they align perfectly. And the first trend is that Israel's overall security strategic situation is getting continuously and consistently better with time. We're going to get into that in a second. This is measurable. This is quantifiable. And at the same time, our global standing, our status, our ability to deal with the propaganda war against Israel, the information war, the psychological warfare arena, in all of these things, Israel's position is deteriorating. So how can that be? How can it be that our security situation, our strategic situation is undeniably getting better with time? Our enemies are getting weaker, and yet our international standing or the information war capabilities, we're seeing a continual deterioration. Well, it's happening for exactly the same reasons, and this is going to be the subject of the video. So we're going to come full circle back to this. Let's start with a quick analysis about why and how our security and strategic situation is getting better. All of Israel's enemies, from Iran, the head of the snake, the Iranian regime. Of course, we're talking about the regime and not the millions of wonderful Iranians who despise their regime and want nothing more than to overthrow it and live in peace with us. It's obvious that I'm talking about the regime and its supporters only. The Iranian regime is at its weakest moment in decades. How can I back that up? Let's look at every component, every which way you can imagine to measure the strength of this regime. The nuclear program, that was the chief existential threat that this regime posed to Israel and to the entire Middle East. But of course, Israel was the first target for annihilation by this regime. The nuclear program has been rolled back by years. The enrichment sites, the ability of Iran to enrich uranium at Natanz, at Fordow, Isfahan, these sites have been destroyed, not in this war, in the first Iran war in June. Remember that war? It now seems like a distant memory, but it really wasn't a very long time ago at all. And that war was primarily aimed at taking out Iran's nuclear program, and it achieved that goal because the Iranians never rebuilt most of those capabilities. Iran cannot enrich uranium, and the many nuclear scientists who were eliminated in that war, the infrastructure, the supply chain, even the centrifuge factories and the components that were used for building these enrichment sites, all bombed. These are not things that are replaced easily, and that's something you might hear me say a couple of times in this video. It's very important to keep in mind because we're hearing some, I would call, suspicious commentary saying that Iran is doing just fine and it's going to quickly replace everything that it's lost, which is one of the most ridiculous assessments that I think I've heard in maybe ever, maybe ever. But hopefully by the time you get to the end of this video, you'll have the same conclusion. So look, the nuclear program, the enrichment, the scientists, the engineers, the components, all destroyed. What's left in Iran of the nuclear program? It's the highly enriched uranium, those 440 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium that's buried under two sites. It's true that it's still under Iranian soil, literally under the soil. And President Trump is now negotiating to try and extract that. And there are other options of getting to it as well, or bombing it. But the bottom line is that even right now, the Iranian regime has no access to that highly enriched uranium. It cannot go and take it. Why? Because the minute it tries to start digging that Iranian soil, out of the ground, that's going to be noticed. These sites are under 24/7 surveillance by the Israeli and American intelligence communities. And so the minute they try and extract that, a lot of red lights are going to be going off in Washington, in Tel Aviv, and other places. And it won't be a long time before that turns into action in the form of airstrikes. So the Iranians cannot get to that uranium. They simply cannot get to it, and they have nowhere to enrich it in. So their nuclear program has been rolled back by years and not 9 months and other fairly preposterous assessments that we've heard recently from unnamed sources. What about the missile program? That was actually the target of this war, Operation Roaring Lion, especially from the Israeli operational side. Many of the over 10,000 strikes that Israel carried out in Iran were aimed at the missile program. 60% of the launchers have been taken out of commission. The launchers are the bottleneck. That's the mechanism that Iran needs to get the missiles into the air. Most of the Iranian missile production industry, the military industrial complex of Iran, has been destroyed. This is something that Iran invested hundreds of billions of dollars and decades in building, not easily replaced at all. This isn't, a cell phone that falls into the sea and you go into a store and buy another one. This took them decades to build and to refine, and now it's lying in smoking rubble. And yes, they do still have some missiles. They do have a missile arsenal. There is a debate about how many. And yes, they can still fire missiles. Nobody's claiming that's not the case, but it's at a fraction of the rate and the quantity that they would like. And they cannot resupply themselves because their industry, their missile industry, is essentially lying in ruins. And also their smuggling is basically non-existent right now. They cannot smuggle missile fuel. There's a heavy naval blockade, which brings me to the third component of the Iranian regime. It's economy and infrastructure, heavily targeted during this war. Lost 40% of its pre-war GDP. And the Iranian economy was a train wreck even before this war. That's why millions of Iranians were out in the streets. They didn't have a tap water. They didn't have fuel. They were struggling to afford food with hyperinflation. And the currency was completely, running amok, and still is. It's even worse. And now they have a blockade. So they had an economic crisis, then a war, 5-week war. Now an economic blockade. They can't export any of their oil. They're losing $500 million a day approximately. Does anybody think that Iran is not weaker? Iran is significantly weaker on all fronts. And I haven't even mentioned the leadership, the dozens of senior terrorist and military commanders and political leaders that were eliminated in this war. None of these people are easily replaceable. I've heard this claim many times. Yeah, they're easily replaceable. Iran is a huge country. Not true. These are not software engineers. No disrespect to software engineers, a highly valuable profession, but it's one that people can do around the world. You can't learn how to be an experienced Iranian military commander anywhere in the world. It's a very unique set and subset of skills, experience, contacts, networks that can only be developed in very specific environment. And those senior Iranian commanders cannot be easily replaced. They can be replaced. They are being replaced, but the people replacing them don't have their experience, their connections, their whole collection of capabilities that enabled those Iranian commanders and terrorists and senior leaders, from Ayatollah Khamenei to the commander of the IRGC, who, by the way, was the third commander of the IRGC since June. His two predecessors were eliminated by Israel. Dozens of other senior commanders of the Basij, which is the internal murderous mechanism, repression. The list goes on and on. None of these people are easily replaced. This creates shock and instability in the Iranian regime. It creates confusion, and they are still fighting amongst themselves right now to figure out who is actually in charge. It's the subject of another video, so we won't get into that. So really, nuclear, missile, infrastructure, economy, leadership, the Iranian regime is at its weakest in decades. Let's shift over to Iran's proxies, Hezbollah. This was the pride of Hezbollah, of Iran's proxy project, and Hezbollah was a monster. It really was a monstrous threat on our northern border. On October 8th, one day after the massacre in the south, Hezbollah joined the war and began raining down fire. Now, when it did that, it had one of the world's largest arsenals. It had, if it would have been a NATO member, it would have been one of the most heavily armed armies in NATO in terms of firepower. I'm just comparing their firepower capability. They had more firepower on October 8th, 2023 than most NATO armies. Let that sink in. Okay, they had over 200,000 warheads of different kinds, mortars and rockets and missiles and cruise missiles. Today, more than 80% of that firepower is gone. They have approximately 20,000 rockets left. Their leadership is gone, and that's hugely significant. Here, too, this is anything but easily replaceable, especially Hassan Nasrallah, the Secretary General, his charisma, his ability to recruit Shiites to the Iranian jihad. In many ways, Hassan Nasrallah was just as powerful and influential in the Iranian axis as Ayatollah Khamenei himself. And he is not easily replaceable at all. And Naim Qassem, his successor, is well aware of that. He doesn't have the charisma. He doesn't have the experience. He doesn't have the blend of operational sophistication and the strategic foresight that Nasrallah had. Nasrallah was a formidable enemy. Naim Qassem is far weaker, and he has yet to prove his credentials to even amongst his own organization. Hezbollah, which way you measure it, is weaker. Its firepower, its leadership. Southern Lebanon, where Hezbollah and Iran basically built a shadow state. And that was the shadow state that was really controlling Lebanon's destiny, not the elected government in Beirut, not at all. That shadow state is now gone. It's in the hands of Israel. Israel has built a security zone in southern Lebanon. It runs 8 to 10 kilometers deep. This is the heartland of Hezbollah. Hundreds of thousands of Lebanese Shiites who were the human shields and the civilian component of the Hezbollah Iranian shadow state have been evacuated for their own safety. And so the whole landscape of southern Lebanon, which is the real basis of Hezbollah, they're also obviously strong in Dakhia, which is southern Beirut, and in the Bekaa Valley, which is, if you look at a map, that's eastern Lebanon. So they've lost so much of their firepower. They've lost 2,000 terror operatives just in the past month. They've never lost that many in a war lasting a month before. Every direction that they look in, things have gotten worse for Hezbollah. Israel is far bolder. When they look south, they see that Israel is not what it used to be. It will take on threats when it detects them. They see that Syria, which was once the main smuggling bridge for Iranian weaponry, that if you look on a map, you can see that Iran, Iraq, which is a majority Shiite country, part of the Shiite axis of Iran, and then Syria, and then Lebanon. There was a whole land bridge as well as an air bridge because some of these weapons would roll right off the Iranian missile production lines and then be flown to Damascus. From there, truck convoys would take them to storehouses in Syria and Lebanon. This was a whole thriving arms industry. This is how Hezbollah became a monster. That smuggling route is basically shut now. Why? Because the new leaders of Syria are the very Sunni enemies of Hezbollah, the people that Hezbollah has been fighting in Syria during the civil war for a decade. Al-Shara and his rebel organizations, the Sunni rebels, Hayat al-Tahrir, they were fighting Iran and Hezbollah. And Hezbollah was doing everything to try and save Assad. Now these Sunni rebels are in power and they are shutting down the smuggling of weapons to Hezbollah. This is the one thing that Israel and the new Syrian regime have in common as an interest. That doesn't mean that we don't have worries about this new Syrian regime. We absolutely do, but that's the subject of another video. The point is that whichever direction Hezbollah looks in, it sees new trouble and it sees that its situation has deteriorated. The Lebanese government is point blank saying Hezbollah and Iran are the problem. They're saying it out loud. And even if they don't have the capacity to do much about it yet, or at this point, just the fact that they're saying it and they're holding negotiations with Israel is a huge blow to Hezbollah standing within Lebanon itself. And the more Israel attacks Hezbollah, the weaker Hezbollah gets, the stronger the potential for actual Lebanese sovereignty becomes. Now, that's not to say that Hezbollah is no longer a threat. It's certainly still a threat, especially to the IDF units operating in southern Lebanon. But because it's gotten so much weaker, it's now much more reliant on guerrilla warfare, which is how Hezbollah started, by the way. This is how the Iranians got it going. In the 80s and 90s, it was a guerrilla terror organization. It basically replaced the PLO in southern Lebanon after Israel threw out the PLO and Yasser Arafat in 1982. Hezbollah and the Iranians started filling that vacuum, and Hezbollah developed as a terror guerrilla organization. That's basically what it's come back to now. It's come back to being a full circle guerrilla organization, hit and run attacks, IEDs, and of course now they've introduced the first person view fiber optic drone threat. They've identified a loophole. The IDF is racing to close that. This is definitely a threat to IDF units, and we're not in any way downplaying that threat. It's a serious threat to the IDF units operating in southern Lebanon, and it has to be dealt with. And that's exactly why there's a security zone. And in that security zone, the IDF is tearing out the infrastructure that Hezbollah spent decades building in every village and school and mosque and medical clinic and hospital throughout southern Lebanon. It's just mind-boggling the amount of weaponry that is coming out of those raids, out of those security operations. That, by the way, is going to soon bring us to the second point. This is a hint about how our security achievements are actually also being used against us by our adversaries and their collaborators in the West. We'll get to that in a moment. Let me just briefly talk about Hamas in the Gaza Strip. All of these things are deserving of their own videos, but yes, Hamas survived the war because of the hostage deal, essentially. But the IDF controls 50% of the Gaza Strip. It has encircled Hamas from every direction. Yes, Hamas is trying to rebuild itself, has about 20,000 armed terror operatives, most of them not very well trained. Yes, it's starting to produce weapons again. It's working on that. It's becoming a threat again. And it has to be dealt with. And I think it will be dealt with because it's not going to agree to disarm. This is a separate topic. There's a whole diplomatic process here, which is aimed at getting Hamas to disarm. The idea that Hamas is going to agree to disarm is fantasy. This is a jihadist, religious fundamentalist organization, and arms are its cultural, ideological, religious DNA for realizing its goal of destroying the state of Israel and building an Islamic state in its place. And they want a caliphate in the long run. They absolutely do share that vision with ISIS and Al-Qaeda, but they have a staged plan. But the bottom line here is that Hamas too is so much weaker because it cannot launch a mass invasion of southern Israel. It could try and get small terror cells in, but it no longer has the ability. It has lost the ability of sending, a division of thousands of terrorists across the border to commit terrible, terrible atrocities as they did on October 7th. Their firepower is next to nothing. Their rockets, and they're still quite heavily armed with AK-47s and anti-tank missiles. They're still a threat to the IDF in Gaza, but their ability to threaten southern Israel has dramatically decreased. And by the way, Hezbollah in Lebanon does not have the ability today to launch a mass invasion of northern Israel. That was the original idea that triggered October 7th. Hamas copied Hezbollah's plan for northern Israel and applied it in southern Israel. This was a Hezbollah plan to begin with. Neither of these terror armies can do that today. Okay, so I think that we've established that our security and strategic situation is getting continuously better. And I would also urge everyone not to look at this in a binary way. There are a lot of people who are saying, how come these enemies are still in existence? Because this is the nature of modern warfare against jihadist asymmetrical foes. They're not going to ever raise a white flag. You're not going to get end of World War II like surrender scenes where they sign a piece of paper and concede that they lost, as the Nazis did and as the Japanese did in 1945. These are not those kinds of adversaries. They will continue fighting, even if they have, 10 terrorists left. They're going to continue fighting, but their capabilities have been vastly decreased, and they're going to continue to decrease. I think that that's been established. For exactly the same reasons that I've just outlined, our position, our status in the information warfare arena has deteriorated. What do I mean by that? Hamas and Hezbollah spent decades with Iranian assistance and doctrine and funding, planting their offensive capabilities, their mass murder squads, their rockets, their anti-tank missiles, which are actually anti-home missiles, as we saw on October 7th, all of their ability to bring down death and destruction on northern and southern Israel. They implanted those capabilities in civilian areas. This is their modus operandi. This is what defines them. And so it's identical, really, in terms of application. Gaza and Lebanon, residential buildings and tunnels, and millions of people became human shields for these terror organizations. Why do they do that? Two reasons. One, it gives them a tactical advantage. It makes it harder for the IDF to identify. They're not fighting in uniform and operating out of bases. They're, hiding amongst their civilians in schools and buildings and tunnels. And also in the information warfare arena, what this does is enable them to basically create a factory of images in which they can show a distorted image of the IDF seemingly attacking a civilian area. Day after day, they will show you, whether it's in Gaza and it's mythical genocide, or whether it's in southern Lebanon now, where the focus is, and every day we have the international media showing, a residential building seemingly just hit for no reason by the IDF. This is why they operate out of civilian areas. Now, the more the IDF is ripping out their infrastructure from these civilian areas, and the IDF has gotten very good at identifying and quickly acting on that identification of these targets, the more images they have to be able to present to the world and to their collaborators in the Western elites. And they have built an infrastructure, not only Hamas, but also Qatar and the Muslim Brotherhood. They've invested billions in influencing higher education in the US. They have partnerships with mainstream Western media outlets. They've got social media bots. They've got a whole infrastructure, the university campuses. Nothing here is coincidental. Nothing here is organic. Nothing here is authentic. This is the biggest well-oiled global propaganda machine the world has ever seen. And is being fed with these images of civilian areas turned into combat zones deliberately so that our adversaries can frame us as attacking civilians. 100% intentional. Now, this is their victory. Okay, we have to be honest. Our enemies, they've lost they've lost the physical war. They're going to continue losing. We're going to continue getting safer. But the narrative war, they are winning that. You have to be honest about that because of their lies and deception and this embedding of their capabilities in civilian areas. The only arena in which they're winning is that arena. Now, I wouldn't trade places with them. I'd rather be safe and alive and strong than popular and dead. And I think I speak for the vast majority of Israelis when I say that. But we have to be aware that this is going on and we have to expose it and we have to fight back against this propaganda machine. So look, I'll leave it there. I've got a lot more to say. Thank you very much for your viewership. I read all of your comments. It means the world to me. It's getting late here in Israel. So I will catch you down the line, hopefully in the next video. I very much look forward to that. And in the meantime, stay safe and we will speak next time.